It's the Blues Rock Show with Pete Francis and Willie Witten.
Welcome to the Blues Rock Show. Pete Francis alongside Willie Witten. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode of the Blues Rock Show. All right, Willie, we've got some pretty good albums coming out this month. A couple that really stick out to me. Dan Patlansky has a new album coming out, Shelter of Bones. Beth Hart has a Led Zeppelin tribute album, a tribute to Led Zeppelin, coming out this month. She actually just released a single for Black Dog, which is pretty great if you listen to that. Els Bailey has an album coming out this month. A lot of good stuff coming out this month. So when you look at the albums coming out in February, is there one that sticks out to you, Willie, that you're really looking forward to?
I think all three have their merits, Pete. I think for each one, I could give you a reason why that they would be the most important. But I'm going to go with the one that I am personally most excited for, and that is the Led Zeppelin covers, tribute, however you want to title it, album by none other than Beth Hart. The reason why I find this to be so interesting is because I always find it intriguing when a current artist goes ahead and takes a bite out of one of the biggest of all time. So for example, when someone covers a Jimi Hendrix song, I always am just thinking like, ooh, are they going to do well with this? Or are they going to blow it? And so when you have Beth Hart going after Zepp, and then obviously we're talking about Robert Plant being the vocal impetus behind that just barrage of wonderful noise that Zepp was, to me, there's a little bit of nervousness. I think Beth Hart's awesome. I know she won't do a poor job of it, but I think that anytime you take on one of those big iconic bands, you know, you're really setting the promise level high. And so I think she'll make it, but I think it's a risk, and I commend her for taking the risk. Pete, what do you think? Which of the three is the one that you're really looking towards?
Well, talking about the Beth Hart album, I would agree with you, Willie, that there is a lot of pressure that comes with that, because she's not just covering any old band here. She's covering Led Zeppelin. And I think when you're covering a band like that, a lot of fans and a lot of people would say like, well, there's no way you can match the original. You know, it's kind of like, what's the point of trying?
Right.
But Beth Hart's voice is just so powerful, and I think works so well with that type of music that personally, I'm really looking forward to it. And the tracks that she's released so far, I think sound outstanding. So I think it's great. I'm looking forward to that. With that said, the album I'm looking forward to most this month is Dan Patlansky's Shelter of Bones. The reason being, it's because this is an all-original album. So I'm definitely looking forward to the Beth Hart album, but not quite as much as this Dan Patlansky album. And again, Dan Patlansky, super underrated. Not so much with Blues Rock Review. He's had 3 albums land in the top 2 of Blues Rock Review's annual top 20 list. He's gotten number 1 twice. So for me, I'm definitely looking forward to this album. And it's been a while since Dan Patlansky has actually released an album. And this is kind of a similar situation to the Eric Gales album that was just released. These albums have been in the works for a really long time, but because of the pandemic, things got pushed back. So Dan Patlansky, you know, this is an album that I already would have been looking forward to, but it's been pushed back. And I think that adds to the anticipation a little bit. And he had more time to work on this album.
Right.
So I think expectations are pretty high because he's had more time to work on this album. And again, I think with him being based out of South Africa, he's very underrated. And a lot of people still don't know who he is, especially here in the United States. He's been carving out a nice audience over in Europe and the UK, but there's a lot of people that need to discover him still here in the United States.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to this album because I think Dan Patlansky is one of the best blues rock guitarists out there. Not only is he a great guitarist, so he writes really good songs as well. And I think that's one of the things that separates Dan is the fact that he's not just this amazing guitar player. He writes really good songs and songs that are accessible at the same time too, which not every artist in this genre can say.
Right.
So for me, it's Shelter of Bones, Dan Patlansky.
Okay, no love for what's behind door number 3, Pete. I thought you were pretty excited about this third album and you haven't said anything about it.
Well, I'm looking forward to that album as well. I would just say, based on what I've stated there, those are the ones that really stick out for me this month.
All right. What else we got in the news? It sounds like every time we're on this show, Pete, we're talking about Spotify. What's going on in that world these days?
So we've got some controversy relating to Spotify. What's new, Willie? I mean,
Nothing.
There's always something going on, right? Well, now in the news, Neil Young basically laid out an ultimatum to Spotify. And he said it's either Neil Young or it's Joe Rogan.
Right.
And because Joe Rogan made some alleged comments about COVID and the vaccines, so Neil Young he's not a Joe Rogan fan, put it that way. So he basically said to Spotify, if you don't get rid of Joe Rogan, then I'm leaving the platform.
Yep.
And Spotify basically said, all right, well, we're sticking with Joe Rogan. So Neil Young, he's out of here. And Neil Young, about 60% of his streams were from Spotify.
Yeah.
So Willie, what are your thoughts on Neil Young leaving the platform? Do you see possibly other artists leaving the platform as well because of this?
I think it's interesting. I think it's two sides of the coin here. The first thing I'm going to say is overall, if I had to sum up in a word, this whole controversy, I would call it annoying. And the reason why I find it annoying is because the pandemic has been with us for, we're working on 2 years now, and we have to take precautions. One of my friends, I don't know, he goes by the name of Pete as well, was recently sick himself with COVID. So it's a very real thing. And I think we're faced with it every day. When I sit back and I want to listen to music, it would be nice if there was one aspect in my life where I didn't have to hear about it. So that's where I get the annoying part come from. On the other hand, there is some intrigue because I'd rather talk about the music aspect of this and what it might mean down the road for streaming platforms. Neil Young has his own site where he sells subscriptions. I think it's like $2 a month to get all sorts of goodies on his back catalog and rarities and whatnot. He's doing just fine without Spotify. I know that the 60% of his streams, that's going to hurt, but Spotify doesn't pay much anyways. I do think other people are going to leave with him. I think he has enough friends in the industry, and I think he has enough respect. He has always been willing to put money secondary and put the cause first, whatever that may be. Ironically, he sort of took on the other side of this years ago when he had the Monsanto Years album, but that's a topic for another day. Will people leave with him? Yes. Will it matter? I don't know, but I'm really intrigued by that because that could be the start of showing a kink in Spotify's armor. And up to this point, they've pretty much been unassailable. Anything you throw at them, it seems to bounce off them. Will this have any sticking traction, action, or consequence to it, Pete? What do you think? Or is this just something else that we're going to forget about in 3 days?
Well, I think, Willie, Neil Young is certainly one of the most high-profile artists that has said, okay, I'm out of here. I'm done with Spotify.
Right.
Because at this point, whether you like Spotify or not, most artists realize, okay, well, if you're going to play the game, you got to be on Spotify.
Yeah.
Love Spotify, hate Spotify. If you want to be successful, if you want people to hear your music, and you got to play the game.
Yep.
And right now, to play the game, you got to be on Spotify. So it is interesting now that Neil Young's being like, you know what? I'm taking my game and I'm going somewhere else. So we'll see if other artists do follow suit. He is a very high profile artist. At the same time, as we mentioned a couple minutes back, 60% of Neil Young's streams online are from Spotify.
Right.
How many artists can afford to lose 60% of their streams? See, I think a lot of artists are not in that same situation as Neil Young, where they can afford to lose 60% of their streams.
And I think it's what we're talking about here, or at least to me, is when we talk about affording to lose the streams, because Spotify's pay is low enough. Yes, Neil Young can just shrug it off. He's got an empire. He's got a back catalog. He can book a tour and just make an obscene amount of money whenever he walks on stage. For artists who aren't as high profile, I think what they're scared of, even if they don't get paid all that much because they don't get enough streams and the stream number times the pay rate is not very good on Spotify, you want to be on Spotify because it gets your music exposed. And if your music gets exposed, it makes it to playlists. And if you put on a playlist and you reach people, then they might go to your concerts. And that is where you make your money these days. So I think that's where Spotify still has that edge. But Pete, I feel like there's a little bit, not to get away from this specific instance, but I feel like there's a little bit of a storm brewing between the streamers, the record labels, and the artists, because there's a part of me that thinks, hey, like, is this going to continue? But maybe the better question is, Pete, and I don't know if we've spoken about this before, but it's ever more important with the way music is consumed, especially post-pandemic or soon to be post-pandemic. Spotify is good or bad for the music universe, or even more cleanly, Pete, forget good or bad. Would you rather live in a world with or without Spotify?
Well, Willie, that's a really good question.
The thing is,
we know obviously that Spotify, most artists are not making much money on Spotify.
No.
On the flip side, a lot of artists gain exposure that they wouldn't otherwise have.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. If Spotify goes away, what happens? Something takes its place.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Of course.
So it doesn't, I don't think at the end of the day, change a whole lot. It's just you have a new king at the top.
Yeah.
And so then everyone is susceptible to whatever that company is.
Right.
And whatever that company wants to do. So right now, Spotify is the kingmaker. If they're gone, well, someone takes their place.
Right.
So would it really change a whole lot? I don't know. What do you think, Willie?
So I think your answer is, and I don't think you avoided the question. I think what you're saying, your answer is indifferent, because it sounds to me like the way that you're looking at it.
I don't think it matters.
That's what I mean. Right. You're indifferent in the fact that call them Spotify, call them Botify, Rotify, whatever. It's just going to be one of these other things. It doesn't really matter. Is that sort of what you're getting at?
Yeah.
I would like to live in a world. So I agree with you. That's the first thing I'll say. I agree with what you said, but I would still like to live in a world without Spotify, if only so that some of the people on these streaming services have their cage rattled a bit. And maybe just having one big person go down somehow in some way, whether it's a Spotify, it certainly wouldn't be Apple Music, but I guess it would be Spotify. It would have to be. Maybe that would encourage or scare the fear of God into some of these other streamers that, hey, you've got to treat these artists better. So I'd say no Spotify, but only because of the effect, because otherwise I agree with your point. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense, Willie.
So there we go. I don't know. I'm not a fan of Spotify. I don't.
Well, what do you guys think? Do you think the world would be better with or without Spotify? Would you rather have a world with or without Spotify? Let us know down in the comments section below. What do you think about Neil Young leaving Spotify, and which February album release are you looking forward to the most? Let us know down in the comments section below. As always, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. And please hit that like button. It really does help us out, and so more people see the Blues Rock Show. That's going to wrap up this week's edition of the Blues Rock Show. For Willie Witten, I'm Pete Francis. We'll see you next time.